in Asheville, North Carolina. We're having a great time just looking around at the vendors. And last night we went to a movie screening of What the Hell, and we also saw some speakers, and we've been having a really great time so far. Oh, what have we ate so far? We've had some...
Oh man, the vegan cupcakes is like cookies and cream.
Cupcakes, yeah. They
strawberry. What else I had?
Vegan chili.
Vegan chili.
And the
few more things.
The icy.
Yeah, there's a few more things we're going for. We just haven't quite got
there. I'm gonna be looking for the falafel, and we're looking for some Lebanese cauliflower and fries that we tried last year.
If I can find those, I'll be safe.
There's my dad buying some vegan taco trio with his Sea Life Not Seafood shirt.
Are you waiting on the sandwich?
The game are written against us and against the animals. Here's example 2. A few decades ago, there was a baby elephant in Mozambique. And like most baby elephants, she loved her family dearly. So elephants have generational families that sometimes have a history and tradition that lasts hundreds of years of culture, of traditions, of learning, where to get food and water. And this baby elephant was cherished by her family. Her name was Tyke. But one day, a bunch of people came down on Tyke's family. They shot her mother, her father, they decimated all the adults in the family, took their ivory away, and decided to hold all the babies captive. So they shipped them off to America, and Tyke from that day on, for the rest of her life, was a slave. And for 20 years, she was beaten with bullhooks, she was shocked with prods, and trained to perform ridiculous stunts and tricks to perform in a human circus. For 20 years, Tyke endured this indignity. For 20 years, Tyke endured the beatings, the bullhooks. If you know anything about bullhooks, they hit these animals with sharp knives. Hook is not even the right word for it. It's a blade. They hit these animals with blades and the most sensitive parts of their bodies to induce them to perform humiliating tricks, because elephants do not want to jump through hoops. They do not want to stand on top of each other. They're forced to do this by violence. They did this every day of Tyke's life for 20 years, and after 20 years, Tyke had enough, so she tried to get away. Has anyone heard the story of what happened to her in Honolulu? What happened? She escaped and she was killed. So for seeking out her freedom, for doing the thing that frankly every sentient being on this planet would do if you were trapped in a cage, being beaten every day of your life by people who did not care about you even one bit. She was attacked, she was yelled at, and she was shot 87 times. She bled to death on the streets of Honolulu. And this was her fate. She was killed for the crime of wanting to be free. And again, no repercussions for the police, no repercussions for the circus, no repercussions or accountability at all for the people who murdered her family in Africa and kidnapped her, enslaved her in the United States. These are the rules of the system. The rules of the system are rigged. The rules need to change. A last example that comes from the animals who are exploited more than any other set of animals in our society, animals and farms. And the scholar Timothy Potrat, a political scientist at the University of Massachusetts, writes about an experience he had when he was doing field work in a slaughterhouse. So occasionally in the slaughterhouses, the animals escape from the pens. And one day in Omaha, Nebraska, in the largest cattle slaughterhouse in the world, where they kill over 5,000 heads of cattle every single day. Every 12 seconds, another cow goes to the slaughterhouse. One of these baby cows, and these are babies when they're killed, they're just 1 year old. Cows have a natural lifespan of 20 years old. They're killed about 1. So it's equivalent to about a 5-year-old human being. One of these baby cows, desperate with fear, rushed out of the pen. And occasionally this does happen, and sometimes they're happy stories, and these animals make it to sanctuary. But on this day, a cream-colored cow, a cream-colored calf, did not make it to a sanctuary. She ran straight into a wire fence across the street from the slaughterhouse. She didn't know what to do. She had been in a CAFO or in a feedlot almost her entire life. She'd been crammed in a slaughter transport truck for up to 20 hours with no food and water. She was desperate for water. She was desperate for food. She was desperate for safety. So she did what all terrified animals did. She just cowered. And because the slaughterhouse workers could not get her back into the pen, could not get her into a truck, they called the police. The police approached the cow. They tried to cajole her. They called animal control. They used shock prods to try and shock her back in the slaughterhouse. But this little cream-colored calf refused to go back to the slaughterhouse because she did not want to suffer and die. And so what they did was what we do to all animals. We're living in fear and not doing what they're told. They shot her. They shot her once and she bellowed out in pain. They shot her again, she fell to the ground. And this is a shotgun, not just a pistol. A shotgun that is tearing through her flesh, tearing through her face. They shot her again and again and again and again and again and again and again. 10 times they shot her in the face with a shotgun before finally she stopped bellowing in pain. And even the slaughterhouse workers, the workers who themselves are using knives to kill 5,000 cows every day, were shocked and stunned and horrified by the scene of violence that they had just witnessed. And Timothy Potrat writes about this, how at lunch that day, the slaughterhouse workers were all shaking their heads and saying, they shot her, they shot her, they shot her. They shot her for no reason. So these are examples of how the system is rigged against the animals and rigged against us as compassionate people who are trying to change that system. That even in these grotesque, horrifying, sickening instances of abject animal cruelty, not only is there no accountability, there is not even a slap on the wrist. Most of these instances, if not for scholars like Timothy Potrat and activists like a few activists in Michigan who advocated on behalf of the family whose dogs were shot by the police, no one would have heard any of these stories because it never makes the news. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We start imagining all the other violence against animals that happens behind closed doors and in lands very distant from the urban areas in which we live. The suffering and atrocities that have been committed are unimaginable. There are over 50 billion animals killed in fashions exactly like those dogs, that elephant, and that baby cow, in factory farms and slaughterhouses and laboratories. And there are trillions of individual animals who are suffering and dying because of environmental devastation we are causing to this planet. We are poisoning the environments in which animals live. We're clear-cutting their homes, burning down their homes, and letting their children starve. And climate change is terraforming this entire planet. It's transforming this entire planet into a barren wasteland where the non-human animals will starve to death and die first. In fact, scientists estimate that already 1.5 million species, 1.5 million species have already been committed to extinction just due to climate change. That is trillions of individual animals suffering and dying in ways that we cannot even fathom. And again, no one is doing a thing about it. Even the United Nations, which has been a strong advocate for action against climate change, in their most recent report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, when they were announcing the plausible and anticipated negative impacts of climate change and arguing for investments in stopping climate change, guess how many dollars they suggested global governments invest in protecting non-human life from the havoc that's being caused by climate change? How many dollars? Just zero. $0.